Hello and welcome to the Tudor Dixon Podcast. I'm Tudor Dixon, and today we have a very serious conversation about the trans movement, and I'm really glad that Oli London agreed to join me. Oli is, I guess I would say, maybe detransitioning. We're going to hear exactly what that means, and we're hearing more about folks detransitioning these days, but a lot of times that's getting pushed out of the news to make room for celebrating young people who are making permanent changes to their bodies to transition. So we just want to get kind of deep and real into Oli's journey. So Oli, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be speaking with you, Tudor.
Well, I am really excited about it. You have a unique story because you are, or were, a transgender person. You still identify as transracial. So I want you to talk a little bit about what that means, how you decided to get there, and what you feel life is going to be going forward. So just give us a little update on how you decided to make these changes.
Right. So what happened as a kid, I was always a lot more feminine. You know, some boys prefer girls' toys and some girls are tomboys, which, you know, can be very normal. So I was always a little bit more feminine. And then with what happened when I was in high school, I started getting breakouts on my skin. And when you're going through puberty, you really start to kind of hate the way you look and struggle with your identity. And I used to get bullied very severely every day because of the way I looked. And also because I was more feminine than the other boys in my class. So I used to get picked on when we would go to swimming class. You know, people would say I was like a woman because I had kind of fat around my chest, so it looked like almost breasts. And I actually later had the surgery to remove all that. So, you know, I used to get bullied all the time, being called feminine or ugly, and, you know, I looked like a monster. So I had a really, really tough time. And then when I became an adult, I actually moved to South Korea, and I was living in Korea. It's an amazing culture, and I kind of fell in love with K-pop, which is, you know, this really fun, energetic, happy music. You know, it's beautiful music. And, you know, it was a chance for me to reinvent myself. I saw all of these pop stars, all of these billboards. And, you know, as in America, and maybe in Los Angeles, people go to a plastic surgeon. Maybe they have a picture of Kim Kardashian. They say, "Doctor, make me look like this woman." So I started out, I was like, okay, I need to have a picture of what I kind of want to look like when I go to the plastic surgeon. So I started showing them a picture of a pop star in Korea, and I was like, can you try and make me look like this if possible? And then what happened is I had that initial surgery, which was my nose, and then I started getting more surgeries over time. And it really became like a snowball effect. I mean, it was really kind of body dysmorphia. I had questions of my gender. And then the more surgery I would do, I then started to still be unhappy. And I thought, you know, everybody around me was telling me I was meant to be a woman, I should be a girl. You know, every time I went on TikTok, Tudor, all the videos I saw were trans people, non-binary people. So then I was just like, you know, maybe this isn't right.
Do you think that was you were targeted because you had looked at some of them? I mean, I know when I see something, I just start to see that over and over again. And generally I get these strange videos of how you can decorate cakes. But then once I watch one, I am constantly barraged with how you can decorate cakes. Do you think that algorithm really is affecting how young people are thinking?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I wrote a book about my kind of gender identity struggles, and I covered the effects of social media. So what happened? So TikTok came about in 2018, and originally it was just very innocent lip syncing videos, dance videos. And then during the time of the pandemic, the videos started to change. So not just for my algorithm, but for every young person.
Oh, that's interesting.
You know, they started to see videos of people sharing their transition journey. So they have, you know, day one of being a girl, then day 10, you know, like a bit like this Dylan Mulvaney. And, you know, that's all I started to see, Tudor. And, you know, a lot of other young people, they're exposed to these videos day in and day out. And it's almost indoctrination, because when you see something so many times, it becomes normalized. So I'd seen this so many times, and everybody around me was like, you're more feminine. I remember as a kid, people would bully me for that. So then I thought, you know, maybe the answer to my identity struggles is the fact I'm trans. Everybody's telling me it. Even TikTok was telling me. So that's when I transitioned. And it's interesting because during the time of my transition, I was literally addicted to TikTok. I was spending 8 hours a day. I was making videos. I was looking at videos. And I was absolutely addicted. And, you know, now I barely use TikTok because I know it's become very harmful and toxic. And I'm much happier. So I really think, you know, social media does have a big part, certainly with me and certainly with so many young people.
Why do you think that, because you've said publicly that people were very supportive of you becoming transgender, and you just said that that there was almost a push, like, this is who you are, you have to be that. But it wasn't that way when you said, I want to be transracial. Why do you think there's that difference there?
Well, so I used to live in Korea and I just love that culture. And I was like, all these people making up these strange identities, people identifying in different ways. It's just like, why can't I look like a Korean pop star? And that was really how it started. I literally said, why can't I look like them? Because many people in Korea have surgery to look like Hollywood stars. And that was it, and people kind of made it sound crazy and stuff. And, it was kind of interesting. It was almost like, I was exposing the woke people and the trans mafia, because they were like, you can identify as anything. Suddenly I'm saying I want to look like a Korean pop star, and then they went crazy. So, there's really, really double standards. And, really it just stemmed from my identity issues. I was basically trying to reinvent myself, trying to change myself completely, because I really hated the way I looked, the way I felt inside. So, it was obviously the wrong decision. Now I've kind of realized that.
It's interesting, though. I think it was Piers Morgan who said, well, what if I were to come out and say that I'm a Black female lesbian? And people went, that's ridiculous. And he said, but how is it different than, and I mean, you truly are coming out as transracial, and people are not accepting of that. But I want to ask you about your journey was to become a woman. You have not ever, you said it was, let me see the quote, because I think it's interesting. You said, when I had all that surgery, I felt like a woman and looked like a woman, but I wasn't, I was trans. And I think that explains how so many women feel about this from the outside, because we're saying, but you don't have the true experiences of being a woman. And it feels from our perspective that people are making fun of us. I mean, you've been very critical of Dylan Mulvaney, who has come out and become a brand ambassador for all these different companies. But I think that Tampax was really the biggest shocker, because it's not something that women celebrate, having their menstrual cycle. It's certainly not an easy time. Oftentimes people have so many struggles with that part of life. They end up with surgeries. They end up with problems getting pregnant. And now we have a man saying, I'm going to advertise something that there was a period of time women were sent out of the entire community because they weren't seen as clean during that time. It's like we have struggled with menstrual cycles for centuries, and here now it's a mockery. So what do you say about folks like Dylan Mulvaney, who seem to be looking for fame? And I think in a lot of cases, women feel like you're stealing our identity because you're looking for fame, rather than coming around us and saying, we understand you. It seems like the transgender community doesn't really understand women at all. And I think that's the most hurtful thing from our perspective.
Absolutely. I speak to women every day. I speak to mothers, and they get so offended by this because it is insulting. And, a lot of these people, Tudor, when you see these adult men dressing as women, it's almost a fetish for them. They're dressing in lingerie. They want to go in the women's restrooms to be seen. So, we have that as well. And that's very, very offensive when they kind of just, parody women. It's a caricature of a woman, or it's you're fetishizing what the woman is without understanding their lived-in experiences. In terms of Dylan Mulvaney, I mean, he is just incredibly offensive. It's so blatantly obvious that he was just desperate for fame. He was on The Price is Right. He was on The Ellen Show as this over-the-top, melodramatic gay guy. He still has the exact same personality now, only he's pretending to be a girl. And what's really sad about that is, he shared his days of girlhood stories. And now, you might have seen on Twitter today, so many women were saying, how many days they've been a woman, day 10,000 of being a woman, and sharing their experiences. And, women should not be mocked. And the fact that Dylan is profiting off this, and all of these woke corporations like Nike, Bud Light, they are adding fuel to the fire because they are completely insulting women. So, I think when trans people claim to be a woman, because even I was trans, I would call myself trans. I wouldn't use women's spaces because I was always respectful. I just wanted to look a certain way. But, a lot of these people, they're offending women and they just don't get it. They think they're entitled to using women's restrooms, women's spas, and it's very offensive.
Don't you? I mean, is there a part of you, because this is the way I look at it, I feel like this is a very sad situation for Dylan, and my heart breaks for him, because I don't see this being sustainable. And what kind of a life is this? I think that people find happiness in people. Biology would tell you that we want to be around people. Relationships are important. That is meaningful in the human experience. And it seems very lonely. And I think that's the thing that maybe people aren't understanding is that when you, like you said, you're not a woman, you give up being a man, you become trans. And that seems to me like a lonely space because most people are looking for a spouse, whether they are same sex attracted or opposite sex attracted. They want to know what that person is and have a life with them.
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of these young people that become trans, they really, they struggle with mental health issues, and a lot of them struggle with the way they look, their identity, they have body dysmorphia. So I think a lot of these cases are people become trans because they want love and attention, they want validation. And then they see people like Dylan Mulvaney that is succeeding. They've become famous, they're getting lucrative brand deals. So a lot of young people look at that success and they think, I wish I could be loved. Because when you're trans, Tudor, I experienced this as trans. I had brands throwing deals at me all the time. I had so many people praising me, positive comments. And, a lot of these kids, they just want validation. And, they're turning to social media. And, when you start to share your transition story, the more extreme it gets, the more likes you get, the more views you get, the more praise you get. So it's really toxic. And, I don't hold anything against these people. I will pray for Dylan. I'm sure a lot of people do because I believe in the power of, people can change, especially with the power of prayer. And it's very sad. And I think what he's doing is very offensive to women. But I pray one day he wakes up from that, realizes the harm he's causing and, tries to become a better role model for young people.
I think that we all know he's an actor. This is an act. Now, obviously, this has been taken to the next level and he's having these surgeries. Are there any surgeries that you've had that you've looked back and regretted? Because I just wonder if this happens and then, having had breast cancer and going through reconstruction, I know for me, I'm like, this is strange. This is different. Do you ever feel that way when you look at surgeries you've had and say, it's just not what I wanted?
Yeah, I do regret. I did do a lot of surgeries, so I had all the chest fat removed, so my nipples are kind of messed up. My face, when I had facial feminization, I basically had all of my bones shaved down. I've had my jaw shaved, my cheeks, my eyebrow bones, and it has made my face asymmetrical. And, I do kind of feel sad when I look in the mirror. I feel, why did I do that to myself? Because, it really upset my family, it upset my friends. But at the time, I was just on this mission. I thought, I have to change myself. I have to be happy. So I do regret what I did. But at the end of the day, I know I can't take that back. So what I'm trying to do is I'm learning from what I've done and trying to raise awareness and help other people. I don't want young people, I don't want an 18-year-old or a 16-year-old going to a doctor and trying to change themselves. I want them to find happiness from within. And that's what I'm focusing on now, positivity and trying to help warn parents and warn kids not to do these things to themselves.
I think what you just said is something people are afraid to say, is that you can't change it back. So often we hear that the puberty blockers are reversible, that the surgeries are reversible. And I've said from my own perspective of having gone through plastic surgery, this is not, you can't change it back. But I don't think that people really understand that. You've obviously had a different experience with the type of plastic surgery you've had. When people tell you it's reversible, what is your response to that?
Well, the gender clinics like to tell you that, it's easy, it's reversible, there's no long-term side effects. It's part of their marketing pitch because, if they actually told the kids and the parents the long-term health consequences of taking hormones for the rest of their life, they wouldn't have any customers. This is a business. They're making a lot of money. So, it's very sad. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to raise awareness. I've wrote a book, Gender Madness, and I'm covering all these issues about how these hospitals convince parents. And what they like to do, they like to use the tactic to coerce parents. They say your child will commit suicide unless you change their gender. Yeah. We need to do this straight away. And what happens when the child detransitions? There is nothing you can do. Once you've done a double mastectomy, I know you can do breast reconstruction, but it's very difficult. And once they take the hormones, you can't reverse that, Tudor. And these clinics are not telling these kids, they're not telling the parents. There's no informed consent. They're basically experimenting and mutilating on these kids. And there's not enough research. It's only a very recent phenomenon. There's not enough research, 20, 30 years down the line. What is the effects of hormones and puberty blockers? There's some research that suggests kids will develop issues with bone growth, bone density, increased likelihood of heart attacks and heart palpitations, and so many other things, and, incontinence. So, we need to alert parents and kids that this is the real consequences of changing your gender.
People get really mad at me when I talk about this because they feel like I have no business talking about this, but I have looked at how this has affected kids. And you talk about bone growth, and we've had stories come to us of young men who were put on, or young women who were put on testosterone and then blocked their estrogen. And we know that estrogen is very important to a woman's bone structure. And one of these young women ended up in a wheelchair because of the vertebrae in her back that were just crushed by this. That there was just no strength in the bones left. And I say this because when I had cancer, my cancer is hormone receptive. So that means that my cancer grows on hormones. So they put me on a hormone, essentially a hormone suppressant. And then we talked about a hysterectomy. And I was, when we would have talked about the hysterectomy, I would have been about 40 years old. And my doctor at the time said that even though there is a risk of cancer, again, that the benefits did not outweigh the risks because of the amount of osteoporosis that could occur if I had a hysterectomy at that age. And I think, I was 40, and to think about these young kids, we're hearing about teenagers that are having hysterectomies. But why is the medical community not standing up and saying, boy, this can be very catastrophic to these children's systems, and that these hormones, they do more than just determine your gender. They really run your whole system and keep you everything on, whether it's your metabolism, whether it's your brain growth. It's so much more than just determining whether you are male or female.
Yeah, absolutely. The changes these hormones make to someone's body. If it's administered to a teenage girl, the muscles grow completely different, the bones grow completely different. It also changes, body parts, genitalia and stuff. So it's really, really dangerous. But, when you have people like Rachel Levine, the transgender US Assistant Secretary of Health, when you have someone like that pushing this, and they have been exposed, there was exposed emails with the Daily Caller, where Rachel talked about profitability and return on investment with gender clinics in terms of transitioning kids. And the Biden administration have made it very clear they want to normalize this. So when you have the government health service pushing this, it's really hard to push back and actually try and expose what's going on. And you're right, you get a lot of pushback. I get crazy pushback. I even have journalists sending me death threats because I'm trying to expose what's going on. And, we all have a duty. These are kids. We have to speak up for them. We have to alert them to the long-term consequences.
And this isn't medicine, and it's not exact. This is not like if someone breaks a bone and you know how to set it again. When we're talking about removing someone's genitals, this is not, there's no real answer to this. And we've heard of, I actually have not heard of a lot of success stories with that situation. You talk about incontinence. I've heard horror stories, and I'm just going to be really graphic and honest with you, but we've been told, these doctors, they take the penis, they invert it, they create a vagina. This is not how the human body works. So the female body has systems that clean and lubricate and all of those things. We have heard stories about feces getting up into this area. There's no self-cleaning. These people have to deal with odors their whole lives. They have to deal with incontinence. This is graphic, but I think that it deserves to be told the truth.
Absolutely. I speak with detransitioners all the time. I'm trying to give them a platform and share their story. And it's a horror story. If a girl is transitioning to a boy, they actually have to cut a big chunk off their arm to make into a penis. And, a lot of them have internal bleeding. They have bleeding every time they use the restroom. It's very difficult for them to walk. But the clinics don't tell them that. And you're right, there are so many horror stories out there, and it's absolutely shocking. You see on Twitter sometimes these graphic images of women that have become men or vice versa. And it's just shocking. It's actually like a science experiment. So we really need to stop this now.
It is a science experiment, and you talk about this creation of the penis, the other way around. You're removing the penis, and I also think that this is something that people cannot fathom ahead of time because you want to be done with this. You want to be the other gender. And so when the doctors, I think in cases where the doctors are like, yeah, this is going to work, there may be some complications, but it's going to work. I think it's so easy to say, I hear that it's going to work and it's going to be good, and not really understand what it means to have your nerves, them cut through your nerves, have no feeling. I've read stories of people who have no feeling between their legs at all. And to me, this is horrifying. I know what it is to have no feeling. You know, I know what it is to have no feeling in the chest area of my body, because that's what happens when they do a double mastectomy. They cut through all of your nerves. It's the same thing, but this is the area of your body that has all of your sexual receptors, you know, all of those nerves that give you pleasure when you are having a relationship with another person. And sex to me is something that you should not be robbing people of, because it's such a defining factor of intimacy with your spouse, of feeling that love and connection. And you talk about people searching for love and connection. How can doctors remove the ability to have a sexual, intimate relationship with orgasms from people, knowing that they will never have that?
Well, they don't even tell the patients half of the time. And, you know, when you're doing this to teenagers, they don't even think about those things. They don't know anything about that. And also, we have to note, a lot of girls that do transition into boys, they can't actually have a baby. They're going to really struggle to conceive in their later life. So, you know, imagine taking a person's right away to have a child. That is just beyond horrifying. But again, the clinics, the doctors, they do not inform these kids. You know, in many Democrat states across the US, they just get a prescription very easily. They need one visit to a therapist, get a signed letter, and then they start on a course of hormones. And the hormones change the body completely. Even without the surgery, these hormones change the genitalia. They promote breast growth in boys. And it's just horrifying, but these clinics are not informing anyone of the long-term consequences.
Well, we saw recently a person who was working at one of these clinics, and she is actually married to a transgender person, who came out and said, I started to see that this may not be truly transgender people that are coming. It's young people who are having a social contagion, because she said, we had a whole entire class come to the clinic, and the clinic was like, yeah, no, this is good. And I think there are genuinely transgender people out there. I mean, we've seen people who have lived their lives as the opposite gender, but the reality is it's a small number. We can't lie about the fact that it's a small number, but we also, what you've said about TikTok and social media, it is convincing people. But what do you think the potential is that whole entire classrooms or friend groups are getting convinced into this? Because, like you said, people were celebrating the fact that you needed to understand you were actually a woman. How many people are getting pushed into that and they can't figure out how to back out of it?
Well, you made a great point there. There is a very, very small minority of people that actually do feel transgender their whole life. So you've got Caitlyn Jenner as a great example. But the vast majority of these kids would never have had these ideas about changing their gender unless they're being taught in schools, unless they're seeing it on TikTok, unless they're going to drag story hours. We need to look at what society is doing. Society is pushing this on kids. And that reference you made, I believe it's the St. Louis, Missouri clinic. I remember there was a whistleblower, and they said that entire groups of girls, they're seeing an increase in girls from the same schools, the same classes,
right,
were being referred to the clinic, 11, 12 years old. And they're being put on these hormones and stuff. And, if we look at the graphs, if we look at the statistics, all of these statistics have gone up very dramatically within really a space of 5 to 10 years. Prior to that, you had very, very small numbers, across the US, maybe a few hundred people per year transitioning. Now, suddenly it's in the tens of thousands, and it's going on a very sharp incline. So we have to look at what is behind that. These gender clinics are popping up everywhere. When you've got the Biden administration normalizing this and pushing it, and you can't escape this. I mean, talk about being an oppressed minority, which is what trans activists like to claim. Literally, you have trans flags painted everywhere. They have the Trans Day of Visibility. And it's like, it is a minority of people. And it's, I get there are some people like Caitlyn Jenner that are, feel trans their whole life. But we shouldn't be catering for a small minority. And we shouldn't be pushing other people to join this.
Well, and that seems like that's why I think everybody's saying, whoa, what is Bud Light doing? Why is Kate Spade doing this? Why is this being pushed on us? And why is it in every movie and being pushed in every television show when this is not necessarily a large community, and also it's not really a satisfying life for someone who is not truly trans. And so pushing people into a lifestyle that is not truly theirs is not going to end well for society. But also, I would say, I think that there's so many people who say, well, gosh, if you say that, you're hateful, and so I think that these companies are being pushed into this because the last thing they want to be labeled as is hateful or not inclusive. And, if you're not inclusive, then you're like the worst person on the planet. And so they can demonize you for talking about it. But I think it has led a lot of parents to be led by some of these radical physicians rather than doing their own research. And that's why I think it's important to have these discussions when you talk about the realities of these hormone treatments. We're talking about kids as young as 11 years old who are girls who are suddenly growing facial hair, their voices are changing, their bodies are changing, vice versa, boys who are growing breasts, their voices are not deepening, but these are permanent changes that cause sterility. And that is something that no one is out there saying. And I've had parents say to me, well, I'd rather they be sterile and happy. But are you happy if you're not, at this point, it's getting younger and younger. So you were in a situation of doing this as an adult, but think about puberty blockers so young. These kids, the boys are not even growing a penis that is large enough to invert. And so they're taking skin from other parts of their body. And therefore they're never getting to the point where they can have any type of romantic relationship. It's the same with the girls. Why are we lying about the fact that a major part of a person's life is removed by these hormone treatments? They can never have children. They can never have sex. They will likely struggle to find a partner. Why is that something we're not allowed to say?
Right. Well, we don't acknowledge that at all because these gender clinics just want to get so many customers through their doors.
Is it money?
There's a lot of money being made. In 2022, it was estimated $2.2 billion was made via these gender clinics as a whole. But what we need to look at, a lot of these kids are being misdiagnosed. So again, with the case with the whistleblower in St. Louis, Missouri, most of these kids are struggling with their mental health. They're teenagers. They're going through puberty. It's a really difficult time. Some of them may be autistic. Some of them may have bipolar. Some of them have depression. And what's happening is clinics are misdiagnosing those things and just saying, okay, well, let's change your gender. That's why you feel like this. And that's completely harmful because, these kids are going to feel 10 times worse down the line. They've already got these pre-existing conditions. So when you add hormones, which completely change the body, completely change the chemical imbalance in the brain, it's only going to make their mental health struggles worse. And like you said, they can't have fulfilling relationships. They're very limited to what they can do in adult life. So, it's only going to make what conditions they have already 10 times worse.
I think it's interesting because when I went through my reconstructive surgery, the surgeon went through in great detail what we could do to make sure that I still had range of motion, what we could do to make sure I could still pick up the girls, still have an active life, my age, what that meant for how we would do the surgery. And I think about that was something that we felt had to happen to protect me, to keep me alive, right? And here are these, I assume these conversations are similar. This is what you'll be limited by. This is what we want to do to make sure you're not limited by this. But how can doctors who sign an oath to do no harm just start cutting into healthy bodies?
I mean, it just doesn't make sense. When you're seeing this, it's like Dr. Mengele from World War II. It's like a science experiment on these kids. And there's no duty of care. We saw, again, with the Missouri case, some of the doctors, when they had patients that were complaining about the effects of the hormones or the surgeries, the doctors basically said, it's not our problem anymore. They've already done the surgeries. That's it. So the problem is, these clinics, they're not doing their duty of care. They have no morals or ethical standards, which is the basic thing you should be doing as a doctor or nurse. That's your number one priority, is protect the patient's health. So
I think that's what people aren't hearing. What you just said is the doctors kind of disappear on them after. If there's something goes wrong, it's like, yeah, I told you there could be a problem. Suck it up.
Yeah, I mean, that's the common denominator. We've seen time and time again, these gender clinics, they do not support detransitioners. We had this gender clinic in the United Kingdom. It's called Tavistock, and it's being shut down because there were so many horror stories. And what happened is the clinic, once the kids were out the door, they didn't do any follow-up studies. They didn't do any checkups like 1 year down the line, 2 years down the line to see the effects of these hormones or puberty blockers. And that's why, Tudor, you see the data is skewed. When they say there's such a low detransition rate, it's because they don't even bother to check on their patients. So, when they say,
But see, that's how medicine works, because, for example, going through cancer, the breast surgeon, I never see the breast surgeon again. I see an oncologist. I see the plastic surgeon. I never see the breast surgeon again, because his job is simply to get the cancer out. These plastic surgeons, their job is not to come back to you and say, how are you doing? Did you need anything else? Can I take care of you? They were trained in medical school to do plastic surgery, and then their patient is gone. And so that's the part of this that doesn't make any sense. Really, there is no follow-up care. And what are these clinics doing? Are they providing the psychologists? Because psychiatrists are now just prescribers. Surgeons are just surgeons. I think people don't understand that medicine is very, very segmented. What your area of expertise is, you don't then help the person afterward. You don't go back to the person and say, well, how is that breast surgery doing that I did? Because he's done with me, And so I think that's another sort of misconception of having these radical surgeries, is that surgeon cares about you, wants to be in your life the rest of your life. No, that's their job. And then they move on.
Yeah, absolutely. But with a lot of these gender clinics, they refer kids to therapists in order to get the gender dysphoria diagnosis. And, these therapists are basically on the payroll of these clinics. So they're going to, sign the kid off for, fine for hormones, fine for surgery. And then that's that. But what happens when they detransition or afterwards? They don't offer therapists. They don't offer psychologists, which, when you're doing this to a child, when you're changing their entire body, they're going through so many changes, which is very difficult to cope with. So it's very important for them to have follow-up studies. How are you doing? Is there any adverse side effects? Because many of these kids are having side effects, and the clinics are just simply abandoning them. They should have a support system, but they shouldn't be doing this in the first place. But, a good clinic would have psychologists, therapists on hand that are non-biased, that their only interest was protecting the patients. But sadly, that doesn't exist.
It's really hard when you are a young person and you feel that peer pressure to then back out of it. We know this from centuries of people being influenced by peer pressure. You've gone through this. You said that you had a lot of the people saying that you're just a woman, you need to go for this and do this. We've heard a lot of detransitioners come out and say, once I said it, it started this train and I could not get off the train. And no matter what I said, people were like, no, go for this, because people around these folks have been so trained to say, support it, that it becomes more than just support. It's, you have to do this. Now, what is your advice to those young people who say, I feel like I'm on a train, it's going too fast, I want to jump off, but I don't want to disappoint everybody around me? What's your advice?
Right. There is so much peer pressure, because once you start doing more extreme things to yourself, you can't really stop. And that was my situation. I was just doing more and more and more. I was on this train that was basically about to crash, and I had to take a step back. I was like, I can't do this anymore. But yeah, a lot of these kids are feeling peer pressured, because when you have the entertainment industry, Hollywood, teachers, your school friends saying, no, this is fine, this is normal that you feel like this, you are meant to be the opposite gender, it kind of reinforces their belief, and they're getting praise, they're getting all this positivity that they've never experienced before. So it's really difficult. And, the problem with people detransitioning is they're very scared to speak about it, because firstly, they don't have anyone to talk to. There's no one out there that will speak to them and say, oh yeah, this is the right thing. All the trans community, they will literally abandon you. They will attack you. They will harass you if you dare to question the narrative that, oh, maybe this wasn't the right decision for this person. You get attacked. So, what is the duty of, all people like me, you? we need to speak up and make a platform for these detransitioners. Give them an opportunity to share their story, removing the stigma. We need to, praise them for their bravery and sharing their vulnerability, and tell them it's okay to do this. And there are various states, Florida and several other states are passing laws to ban gender affirming care, and several states are now allowing kids to sue these clinics. So, I think that's the step forward. The more people that come forward, the more we can stop this.
I think it is amazing that you've been so brave, that you've been willing to go out there and have this discussion and really open up what happened to you, how you made these decisions, and be kind of a sounding board for these kids. And even for kids that are saying, gosh, it's going too fast, being there, that they can look you up, that they can find out what you're doing. Just tell our audience really quickly where they can find you, what you're doing next, about the book, all of that stuff.
Right. So I'm very active on Twitter. I expose a lot of the gender ideology. So that's at Oli London TV, also on Truth Social at Oli London. And so I've written the book. So the book is, half of it's about my experience, basically what led me to that place, the bullying, the influence of social media. The second half of the book is really examining what is going on in the world right now. Where has all of a sudden this push to transition kids come from? Because it's a very recent phenomenon. So, I examine TikTok, I examine the history of transgenderism. The first transgender operations were in the 1920s in Germany. I look at all that and I look at how did it get to where we are today, where we're doing this to kids. I also look at the attack on parental rights. I spend most of my time in America, so, I've examined all the different state laws and how parents can get involved, because many of these schools, these woke schools, are teaching kids about changing the gender, and the parents have no idea. So I want to help the parents see the warning signs and be more involved in the things that their schools are pushing on their kids. So it's called Gender Madness, and it's on pre-order on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, and other bookstores right now.
Thank you so much. I so enjoyed talking to you, Oli London. You are doing incredible things. We're going to keep following you. I'd love to have you back on sometime.
Definitely. I really appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, thank you. And thank you all for joining us on the Tudor Dixon Podcast. Make sure you check out TudorDixonPodcast.com for this episode and others. You can subscribe right there on the website, and make sure you join us the next time on the Tudor Dixon Podcast. Thank you.